When did this deconstruction begin? It started with a feeling, and the feeling came out of nowhere. It wasn't like I was looking to deconstruct. I remember it was January 2021, and I was working on my ministry. I was thinking about the things that I wanted to do that year. And I remember sitting in my living room on my laptop late at night, and I just started writing. I started writing about my doubts. And I literally do not know where that came from. I wasn't doubting anything, consciously at least. I know, very Jungian. I was not doubting anything. I wasn't watching deconstruction videos. I wasn't struggling really. I actually was doing quite well. I had a savings. I had multiple investments. I had stocks, crypto, and I was working on my finances. I actually had the most money that I ever had in my life. I know it's not about money, but I was doing okay. So the fact that I was thinking those things actually was really strange to me. And I have these files saved on my laptop that I literally haven't looked at in a couple years now. I called them reflections. And I just started writing about what I had been feeling. But I didn't know I'd been feeling that. That's the thing. It's not that I was thinking about anything. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel like I was doubting. That's the crazy part. It's like it almost felt like, cuz I had been making strides in my life. Like, as an example, I had spent a couple years learning the stock market under Sandy Krakowski, my business mentor at the time, and her partner John Bilal. And I loved every morning at the bell, 9:30 a.m. every morning. I'd get up, and it felt so good. This was actually after I had left ministry. Wait. See, even my timeline is all messed up. Like I'm forgetting. Yeah, wait. I didn't start doing the stock market until after I left ministry, and I had left ministry. I knew I was going to be leaving in March. I heard an audible voice that told me to leave prophetic ministry. And I had absolutely no thought that I was ever going to do something like that. On a real 3D level, why would I want to give up something that I had built? I built that ministry from the ground up. I was about to take it in a higher direction. I was starting to bring more music into things. I was getting ready to launch a school. I was really working on courses. I was wanting to do events. It was my plan. It was just on a very base level. It wasn't just take the spirituality out of it. It's like, this was what I was doing. I'm a minister. I'm building an online ministry. And I was starting to get very serious about that after a couple years. And then I heard the voice that told me to leave prophetic ministry. And I remember I went and laid in my bed. The presence was so powerful. It almost felt like it wasn't a choice, even though, of course, we all have free will. But it felt like a warning. Like I wasn't doing the right thing. And I know Christians would probably think that that's like from the devil, or it was the voice of Satan, it was demonic. you let things in, Missy, this happened because of this and that. No, I was completely on fire for Jesus at that time. And I was only believing that I was going to become bigger and bigger and bigger, because when I was a child, I saw myself in stadiums. I saw myself on stages, and maybe it's just because I grew up with the mega church culture. But I think it was more than that. I just always knew that I was destined to be a quote unquote voice to this generation. Again, one could argue that that's because that's the vernacular that I was raised with. You're a voice to this generation. That's very charismatic, Of course, you could argue that, but it was more than that for me. It was like, because I actually had segregated away from my parents when it came to beliefs about 10 years ago, a little more than that now, where I had started to read more of like the saints. I had started to look more into the Christian mystics. I tried to stray away from the megachurch sort of mindset. I wanted to connect more with nature. I wanted to connect with God. I wanted to connect more with acts of service. I got involved with Iris Ministries, Heidi and Roland Baker. They're out in Mozambique, Africa, where they take in children who have been orphaned. That was more the direction that I was heading. And Iris Ministries is directly connected to Bethel Church. So they actually had at one point a marriage ceremony to marry the two ministries, quote unquote, maybe not quote unquote, Iris Ministries and Bethel Church, because they really supported one another. And I got heavily involved with that to the point where I felt really more at home with the Bethel movement than I felt with the prosperity gospel, which is how I was raised. I was raised with Kenneth Copeland, Jesse Duplantis, Creflo Dollar. I have memories every year because the Believers Convention was every summer. I have very fond memories of my mom going to the store and buying fresh notebooks and pens so that we could all sit around the event and take notes, and we would go out on the back porch and my mom would play the convention on her phone, and we'd be sitting out in the sun in the pool, and Kenneth Copeland would be speaking, and I'd be eating a snack, or I'd be on the hammock, and it was this whole thing that we did as a family. We even had people over, or we went to their house. It was a thing. And so it's hard to really say when I look back on everything that it was all like evil or wrong or I disagree with it, because it's not that I disagree, quote unquote, with everything. It's more, it's hard to, like, I remember sitting there and listening to those messages while the convention was on, and I remember disagreeing with what was being said, because I was literally like an hour before the convention came on, up in my bedroom, praying in tongues in my prayer chair, which I still have and still use to meditate now, and I still pray. But I would be praying in tongues, and I would be, I called it intercession, because that's what I was taught it was called, is intercession, basically intercession is quote unquote standing in the gap for other people. So you'd be praying. I prayed in tongues for other people, or the way that I saw it was for the world. I wouldn't know what I was praying. I just felt like it was my part of my mission to be praying day and night for the world. Did you feel, Miss Gordon, like the weight of the world was on your shoulders? Oh, absolutely. And I don't even mean that in like a Messiah complex way, like, oh, it's the world is relying on me. I knew there were others praying as well. You know, I knew, or I considered myself to be one of the holy ones, and I didn't even look at myself as a holy one. Like, I would have never said something like that out loud. I didn't look at myself as self-righteous. I looked at it as an honor that I was like one of the saints that was here on this planet to pray for it and to pray for others, because it was a broader thing. It wasn't just me praying for like my friend Sally. It was me praying in tongues for hours and hours, and I'd be on my knees and I'd be crying. I mean, like full on crying, not just a little bit crying, and my whole body would be shaking. You know, charismatics talk about the kabad glory of God. It's like this heavy, weighty presence that comes on you. Sometimes I would be on the ground and I couldn't even move my arms off the ground because it would feel so heavy. And I would have these experiences where I'd see angels and I'd have open visions and go into these trances, which, you know, the New Age world calls astral projection. Like, I would go places. I would be in these times of prayer and intercession, and I would be in the jungle somewhere speaking to a man in another language that I didn't know. And we'd be communicating back and forth, and he'd be telling me things. Sometimes I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would be in somebody's house, you know, or I'd be in a hospital room, and I would travel to these places. And I believed that even if the only thing that I ever did in my entire life was just pray every day, I believed that that was my mission at one point. When I worked for my dad, like when I was working in my parents' ministry for 7 years before I started my own ministry, I wasn't a main speaker. Like, sometimes my dad would give me like 10 minutes or something, and I would play music every weekend, but my parents would joke, they used to call me the quote unquote in-house prophet, where this was another part of my job that I considered to be my job. I would pray for hours and hours for the ministry and the family as well, and then I would write out, New Age world calls this automatic writing. Never would have used that term in the past myself. Back in the day, I would have just looked at it as writing out a prophetic word. And I would write pages and pages of information that I didn't have to use my brain at all. I would just write out the info. Oftentimes, I would also get accompanying visions. If not always, I also would have dreams, and we'd go out every single morning in the car as a family, and we'd go get coffee, and then we would park at the river, and everybody would listen to me talk about the things that God showed me to share with the family, you know, and I would share these detailed visions that I had, and I'd read out the prophetic word, and it would be like insight of what we should focus on as a family in the ministry and things like this. So it was like a dual role. I felt like I was a prophet, you know, and again, I wouldn't have even used that term for myself. I actually was very careful because I really believed in the scripture that said something along the lines of like, let other people say who you are. Like, let them speak good of you. Like, don't speak good of yourself like that. And I know throughout different denominations, like, it's very common for somebody to be called a prophet or a bishop. And of course, I've always known that. I'm just saying, in the charismatic context, to call yourself like Bob Jones or something, like, I am a prophet like Bob Jones. I actually had a vision one time after Bob Jones had died, and he appeared to me. I don't know if it was a vision or a dream, but anyways, there were just multiple. I had so many experiences that were just, paranormal, like between worlds, people that had already died. And the charismatic church did not agree with that necessarily. They would say, like, don't talk to the dead and things like this. But I had dreams and visions and trances and like open visions, extremely spiritual experiences where people who had already died would speak things to me. And all of that stuff, I miss it. My life just feels so boring now that I deconstructed. It's like I used to have a routine every day. I just used to feel like I had a purpose. Like, I would wake up every single day and I'd be like, okay, it's time to pray. Did you always do this throughout your life, or was this something that you did later in life? I mean, ever since I was a little girl, I would pray every day. But it became more severe as I got older. I took my calling way more seriously. And I think it was when my parents went into ministry. My dad was a general manager over a Ford truck dealership for 25 years. His father owned it. Even though my dad did have like a quote unquote regular job, though, throughout my childhood, it still was not normal by any means. My dad would always be doing different events. Like, he would be doing worship. We would always be at different churches. My parents were very active in whatever church we were a part of. It's like they looked at it as their own ministry in a way. Like, they gave their lives to wherever we were stationed, And my dad, he always wanted to be a minister his entire life. They called him Dad when he was at Interlochen, which is like a music camp. He would go around and so we were a music family as well. I grew up with my dad. He's a pianist and a singer. And so I always grew up around music as well. He left UConn, and my grandmother was, this is the story I was told, that she didn't leave her room for 3 days because my dad left college to go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to like this like ministry school basically. And then he ended up just working for my grandfather, and his dream was to always be a minister. So he worked at the dealership for 25 years. And then when my grandfather, passed away, my dad decided that he was going to start his own ministry, but it was a very particular type of ministry. It was house churches. So it started with one house church, and then my dad expanded it, and the vision was to have a group of people. Like, we would have a meeting at their house, and then we had a meeting at their house, and they would have different people there, and then at their house they would have different people here. Another way to look at this is called cell churches. It's a terminology used for this idea that there's one person at the top, and then there are these other churches, mostly out of homes, where people would gather and they'd all be part of it, but they would be in separate homes. And so we had a few of those, and then it ended up being our main home church. So I didn't think it was weird. I believed in all of it. Like, I thought that it was a vision shown to my dad from God. And, my parents are still doing it today. They moved to Florida a few years ago. And, it's just a lot. It was always my dad's dream, and I wanted to support that. And I became more and more radical myself, because when you are separate from society and you're in your own little bubble, it's very easy for that to happen, for you to kind of lose touch, with reality, but even more than that, lose touch with society at large. It's kind of an isolation. So we would go out every morning and pray together, and I'd share the prophetic words, and I made it my mission and my duty to be this prophet for the ministry, and I felt like I was living my mission. And then when they moved to Florida, I stayed in Connecticut and was actually homeless, and I was taken in by a man who was like a grandfather to me, and I stayed at his place, and that's when I started my own online ministry. Well, Miss Gordon, looks like that's our time, so I will see you next week, and we can continue diving further into your deconstruction. Hey guys, it's been Missy Gordon, the Metamystic here. I wanted to try a little bit of a different format this week, do kind of a therapy session sort of a thing, and just talk. Like, I didn't think about what I was going to say. I just wanted to see what was going to come out, and I just wanted to see how this would flow for an episode, so that I can get some of my story out here, because it feels so dense that I've just got to start. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I feel like I have to just start talking about this stuff, and if it's long and if it's boring, it is what it is. I just need to get the I'm not saying that you guys think I'm boring. I'm just saying it's like, I got to get the info out here. And so I'm going to try this a little bit, and we'll see. I'm always switching stuff up, because I'm trying to just keep it fresh. And so I love you guys. If you would like to support the channel, of course, as always, you can purchase merch on my Etsy shop. You can also donate if these videos are helping you to support the channel. Links down in the description. I would also love to hear from you. My email is in the description as well, and I would love for you guys to leave comments and share what you think about what I said, and share any thoughts that you have in your own stories down below in the comment section. So I love you guys, and I will see you on the next one. Take care.